Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the most exciting happening in film music in many, many years. And it came out in 2015. It's the complete score to Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, composed by Charlie Chaplin himself. You know, it's a little known fact in film scoring history that Chaplin did his own music to most of his films. In fact, not only did he do the music to most of his films, but later in his life, when he was in his 70s and 80s, he went back and rescored most of his feature silent films to his own music. It was that important to him. And he was really quite a musician, although self-taught. He played the violin, he played a little cello, he played the piano, but he couldn't read a score. So how did he compose an orchestral score? Well, like most film music composers, he had assistants. He would write the tunes or hum the tunes or create the tunes, and then a battery of associates would go together, orchestrating and arranging them and conducting them, of course. And in this particular case, in the case of Modern Times, his principal assistant was David Raksin, who was, of course, one of the most famous composers of film music. He was his signal achievement was Laura, and the famous Laura theme. He was a composer who wrote scores more or less in a jazz idiom later on. And if you have that fabulous, Charles Gerhardt RCA film music series, although in this case Charles Gerhardt wasn't conducting, David Raksin was, there is a David Raksin film music disc. So he knew what he was doing. And in 1935-36, when Modern Times was being put together, Raksin was Charlie Chaplin's assistant in Hollywood, which I think is absolutely fascinating. It really is. And he was very, very, very good assistant too, because Chaplin stood over his shoulder, breathing down his neck, making sure that everything was exactly the way he wanted it to be. So although Chaplin could not read a score and could not physically compose all the notes and orchestrate the whole thing, it is absolutely incorrect to suggest that this music is anything other than Charlie Chaplin's. And boy, is it great music, because Modern Times, as some of you may know who have seen it, has only a few words here and there and one song in which Charlie Chaplin actually sings. And the rest of it is music, the entire film. It's an 80-minute long score at a minimum. I mean, depending on what tempos you take, and I suppose which cues you use and whatever, and putting together a separate album. It's a very, very long and basically continuous piece of music. And so then the question becomes, how well does it hold up away from the movie? Because in this absolutely stunning performance, which is, the whole score was been reconstructed by conductor Timothy Brock, who is a silent film music score conducting specialist. Boy, is that a specialty. He put the whole thing back together, mostly from the surviving orchestral parts, and it really works fabulously away from the screen. Brock, in his very, very intelligent and extensive notes here, goes very, very far toward explaining how perfectly the music is suited to the images in the film. And it is. There's no question about it. It's absolutely magnificently synchronized to the action on the screen. But when you're listening to this stuff separately, we don't care about that. What we care about is, does the music have enough substance to survive being played by itself? And this is 80 minutes of music. And the answer is yes, it really does. It's really, really good music. There's all kinds of, the imagery, of course, because there's no dialogue per se. The entire story is essentially told through motion, vision, images, and motion. It's like a ballet. It really is. And the music has that danceable quality. Chaplin himself was a vaudevillian. His parents were vaudeville performers. That's how he grew up. And that was the style in which he was trained. And there's a lot of that in this music. It's just wonderful. Let me give you some cues. I want to play you a few cues because this is on CPO. Thank you, CPO, so I can play you some cues. It's Timothy Brock with the NDR Radio Philharmonia playing absolutely fabulously. The most famous scene in the whole thing comes at the beginning. It's when Charlie Chaplin gets sucked into this gigantic machine with all of its cogs and wheels and whatnot, which is absolutely ripe for fabulous 1930s machine music. In fact, this will sound like a lot of those Bugs Bunny or Warner Brothers cartoons that we heard when we were kids. It's that kind of music, and here's a sample of the machine music from the score. Fabulous, isn't it? I mean, just think, Charlie Chaplin wrote that. In fact, the entire score, let me give you the orchestration list, because it's really quite an extravagant orchestra for its day. It's 2 piccolos, 2 flutes, English horn, an oboe, 5 clarinets, holy cow, a bass clarinet, a contrabass clarinet, soprano saxophone, 2 alto saxophones, tenor saxophone, a bassoon, 2 horns, 3 trumpets with 9 different kinds of mute. Wow, that's a lot of mutes. Tenor trombone, bass trombone, tuba, and 4 percussionists. I love that part, don't you? Playing a tenor drum, a bass drum. Let's see what this is. Large cymbals, suspended cymbals, choke cymbals, Turkish and little Turkish and Greek finger cymbals, a gong, holy cow, a drum kit, 2 xylophones, a vibraphone. What else have we got here? A marimba, a glockenspiel, chimes, 3 tuned anvils. It's like Wagner, the Ring. 3 tuned anvils. Where were the anvils? Oh, yes. Temple blocks, wood blocks, castanets, triangle, and timpani, harp, piano, celesta, and various sound effects here. A small vocal quartet and full strings. That is quite an ensemble. And apparently Chaplin tinkered with this stuff endlessly. The original conductor was Alfred Newman, none other than Alfred Newman, whose last score was for Airport. It's one of my all-time favorite film scores. He was a terrific movie composer in his own right. But originally he was the conductor, and Chaplin apparently nagged him to death while he was conducting this thing, making sure that the synchronization was absolutely perfect and messing with the orchestration as they were recording it, which made Brock's job in reconstructing the score a particular challenge because, of course, all the changes were written into the parts. There was no actual big orchestral score that you could look at to contain all of the changes and the complete score as it was recorded, which makes things even more complicated. Here's another bit. Reminds me a lot of Gershwin. It's from that period. It has such a delicious period flavor. I'm not even going to talk about where it comes in the movie. It doesn't make any difference. It really doesn't, because the music speaks for itself. It works beautifully away from the movie. It's captivating, absolutely captivating. Here you go. Now, this music has been recorded before, some of it. You should know. There was a release of the original film score. This is the one that Newman conducted. And for some reason, it's not as complete, I think, as this one, but this is the one that Newman conducted. And it's in, of course, 1935-36 sound. And it's not always that pleasant to listen to, and you miss a lot of the coloristic detail. But it exists, and you should be aware of it. And also, there's an excellent disc of Charlie Chaplin film music with bits from the Gold Rush, The Kid, The Circus, and Modern Times, but only 17 minutes of it. This is Carl Davis with the Deutsche Symphony Orchestra Berlin on RCA. And this is a great disc. I mean, it's worth having all this other music as well. Really an extraordinary, extraordinary experience to hear this. And, it's ironic that in the classical music business, which purportedly deals with music that has survived the eons and will be with us for all infinity, something that comes out in 2015 is generally forgotten by 2016. But this disc, the one that matters, is still available. And that is also a big deal because you can still get it, and you should get it while you can. You really need to, because God knows how long it's going to last these days. It's impossible to tell, but it's around and it's fabulous. And I'm going to play you one last sample just so you get an idea of how much melodic variety and orchestral color and cinematic and atmospheric presence this music really has. It has as much personality as Charlie Chaplin's on-screen character. It's absolutely perfect for what it does and delicious to listen to on its own. Here you go. Curious what that is? Go watch the movie and figure it out. There's no need. You can just put this thing on, let it rip, and you've got 80 minutes of absolutely entrancing music. I cannot recommend this strongly enough. And like I said, it came out in 2015, but, hopefully it will be with us for as long as Modern Times remains with us. Absolutely an experience and a milestone in the history of film music. I love this stuff, and I hope you will too. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Take care.